Oral question, Baroness McIntosh of Pickering.
I beg leave to ask the question standing in my name on the order paper.
My Lords, before I answer the question, I must say how sad I am to hear of the death of the noble Baroness Randerson, who I've known for a long time. I was expecting to see her in her place today for this question, but sadly and unexpectedly, that's not to be. I will say more at the second reading of the Buses No. 2 bill on Wednesday. To the question, we aim to keep the level of fares at a point that works for passengers and taxpayers. The forthcoming 4.6% increase to regulated rail fares is the lowest absolute increase in 3 years. To further balance rail fares with the cost of living, various concessions, rail cards and promotions are available, and in early 2025 we are holding a network-wide rail sale giving passengers savings of up to 50% on selected advanced and off-peak fares.
Thank the noble lord for that answer. May I add my personal condolences on the loss of Baroness Randerson, an outstanding parliamentarian and public servant. Does the noble lord agree that the rail fare increase is a direct consequence of agreeing an increase in train drivers' pay without agreeing an increase in productivity? Could he explain to the House how he expects the fare increases and the inflationary increase to actually achieve the government's core goal of fuelling growth in the economy?
The pay increase for both train drivers and other railway staff, which was made last July, was in truth very little different from the proposals of the previous government, but which were manipulated so that the dispute was unsolved and unresolved for many, many months, leading to a huge loss in revenue for the railway. The previous government's proposals had no productivity attached to them, and this government was not in a position to offer productivity simply because many of the train companies had not in fact developed proposals which would enable a wage deal to be made.
My Lords, under the last government, it's outside. Leave it. Under the last government, it's us here.
Thank you. May I also add my condolences to her family and pay tribute to the work that she did in Wales, not only on cultural matters but also on transport matters, and she'll be greatly lost. My Lords, may I ask the Minister, would he accept that one matter that is even more important to rail travellers than the cost of the tickets is that the trains are actually running? What is the answer to the shortage of drivers that apparently is the reason why Avanti West Coast are unable to maintain their timetable so often? And what is the government doing about it?
The shortage of drivers, and indeed in some cases train managers and guards, is endemic and is a result of insufficient attention being paid over a long period of time, including that period of time in which the last government were in control, so the train companies actually having enough staff to staff the service. This government intends to do something about the numbers of drivers, the numbers of train managers and the number of guards, and it also intends to make running the railway a 7-day-a-week issue rather than in many cases a railway where 6 days are rostered and the 7th day is depending on people volunteering for rest days.
Lords, under the last Tory government, what we saw was it become cheaper sometimes to fly to New York than get a train from Manchester to Euston. Will the government's action make train travel affordable for ordinary people? Because at the moment, they've left us with a legacy where many people can't afford to travel by train.
I thank my noble friend for his question. The truth of the matter is that regulated fares are controlled by the government. There are many other fares on the railway, some of which produce eye-wateringly expensive charges for what used to be the traditional peak period, and others are extraordinarily cheap, even by continental standards. One of the many jobs that this government has to do in reforming the railways is to rationalise the 50 million fares on the railways and make them affordable and understandable for passengers in order to improve revenue and improve demand on the railway.
My Lords, it's with great sadness that I lead for the Lib Dem group today on this transport question, given the tragic passing of our noble friend Baroness Randerson. She was such a wise person, and we will miss her enormously, and I hope the moving tributes from across the political divide and beyond will provide some comfort to her family and friends at this time. My Lords, given that rail journeys remain below pre-pandemic levels, could the Minister outline specific ongoing measures the Government is considering to incentivise rail travel?
I thank the noble Baroness for her warm tribute to Baroness Randerson. As I said, the Government is to have a rail sale early this year in which many millions of tickets will be sold at discounted fares. The noble Lords will know that following COVID, the demand characteristics of the railway have changed. There is less commuting, and there still is, despite changes in working practices, and there's more leisure travel, and that gives real opportunities to produce a fresh fares scenarios which will incentivise travel. I would also say, preempting a question that otherwise will be asked, that actually the railway needs to be adequately able to cope with leisure travel for all 7 days of the week in order that people can not only travel cheaply but get a seat when they do.
My Lords, may I echo the noble Lord the Minister in what he said about the late Baroness Lady Randerson, and the fact that we will have an opportunity to discuss her sad demise later in the week and return to the subject then. May I ask the noble Lord, in the future he envisages for the reformed railways, will it still be the case that regulated fares are set by the Secretary of State, or does he expect that power to pass to Great British Railways? Will this be in the consultation document that he has promised is going to be issued? And when are we going to see that consultation document, given that he had hoped that it would be, he told the House, that he hoped it would be issued before the Christmas recess, which clearly hasn't been the case?
I thank the noble Lord for his comments on Baroness Randerson. The future of the fares structure of the railway, it's overwhelmingly likely that whoever the Secretary of State is, they will continue to have a strong interest in the fares structure of the railway, but it's also the case that the proposition is that Great British Railways would be responsible for both revenue and cost, and therefore would have some freedom to set fares. Yes, it's true that I did hope that the consultation document would be available before Christmas. That clearly is not the case. The passage of the seasons in political time is variable, of course. So, but I am going to promise it in the next few weeks.
My Lords, the government promised us that public ownership of the railways would mean lower fares and better performance. We, of course, now already have 4 previous franchises run by the state, run by him and his department. Have those 4 areas experienced lower fares and better performance?
So, the first thing to say is that public ownership of the railways is not, as the noble Lord knows, the only issue that needs to be resolved for the railway to run better. And he'll also know, because he was there at the time, that 2 of the companies were taken over at times of really great distress in either performance or commercial performance, and that there are companies in those 4 where actually better performance and innovative fare structures have delivered a real result, notably the London North Eastern Railway. He must know that the performance of Northern is not very good, but he'll also know that it's been in public ownership for 6 years. And I've said from this position before that there have been industrial disputes there which have been going on so long that the management couldn't actually immediately enumerate how many they'd got. Now that seems to me to be a failure of the previous government and the failure of the failure of the previous regime, because if you take a railway company into public ownership, you should seek to resolve the issues about performance that it has. And this government intends to do just that with those train companies already in public ownership which aren't performing in the way that London North Eastern Railway is.
My Lords, that concludes oral questions for today. Any members wishing to leave the chamber to do so now.